Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. In this episode, I am joined by Julia Hogan, and we are talking about NFP, fertility awareness, and how that fits in with self-care. Self-care is like such a buzzword right now, so I'm so excited that Julia and I had this conversation. I'm really excited to share it with you. So let's jump right in. All right, we are welcoming Julia Hogan to the podcast. Julia, I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to chatting today.
Yeah. Could we just start with a little introduction to yourself and how you're connected to this NFP world?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Julia Hogan, and I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor, which is just another way of saying a licensed therapist. And I have a private practice out in Rosemont, which is just outside the Chicagoland area. And we specialize in faith-based counseling. So that's sort of one part of my day job. And then the other part is I do a lot of writing. So I have a book that I wrote about 2 years ago on self-care. It's called It's Okay to Start With You, and it was published by Our Sunday Visitor. And then I have a second book with them coming out later this year, but a whole round of intense edits stands between me and that publication date. So I can't get too excited about it yet. And then I write a lot of articles for various Catholic websites. So for example, the Grotto Network or Verily Magazine, and Natural Womanhood as well, which is a really cool site. And they focus on NFP and, just understanding your cycle and all of that really cool stuff. So I occasionally write for them. So that's really what I do. And I really am very passionate about authentic self-care. And I know that we'll dive more into it, but that is just one theme that keeps coming up in my work for me over and over again, whether I'm working with my clients or in my writing, is just, I think it's something that's so important to helping us be who we really are and kind of clear away the noise or the distractions or the things that are holding us back. And so it just feels like something reinforced. So I'm really excited to be here today to chat about it with you. And I think as far as how is NFP in my world, I would say it's really something that I found has been helpful for a lot of my clients. I'm not an instructor or anything, but often I'll have my clients come to me and, we'll be talking about mental health issues, and then something will come up with their cycle, or we'll be talking about advocating for themselves in healthcare, and they'll be talking about, they have really awful cramps or just something else isn't right, and their doctor can be really dismissive towards them. And so we'll be talking about, how do you be assertive, and and I find a lot of times that a lot of my clients haven't heard of NFP, or they have a different understanding of it. And so I find that, while I'm not an instructor, it's an opportunity for me to kind of open that door and let them know that there's that whole world there, and kind of invite them, to investigate and learn more and see if it will help them. And then finally, I think just, mental health, we're body, mind, and soul. And so you can't separate those things out. And so what's happening in our bodies influences our minds and vice versa. And so there's that connection there, which is really interesting. So a little bit of a different perspective probably than maybe an instructor or practitioner that you're used to talking to, but it's really cool to see how, your mental health and your physical health are interrelated.
Oh my gosh. I love that. And I love that you as a non-instructor are bringing NFP into the conversation in like real life scenarios. And that is what we need more of. And I absolutely love it. One of the things you mentioned, which just totally sparked me, was that you put the word authentic in front of self-care. And, self-care is like such a buzzword, especially after this year, like everybody just got thrown on a roller coaster, and it's like, oh, self-care is this, self-care is that. Like, you just have to, go spend thousands of dollars on a spa weekend, and that's self-care. And what we're going to be talking about today is that is not necessarily self-care. And that self-care it's not self-indulgence. Like self-care is an important part of your routine.
Exactly.
So let's define that. How would you define self-care?
Yes, I define self-care as any practice that promotes your overall well-being. And then I break that down into 5 different categories. So your physical well-being, your mental well-being, emotional, relational, and spiritual. And they are all connected. So thinking about them maybe as spokes in a wheel instead of linear points that are separate from one another. But it's really any practice that promotes your well-being. And that definition is purposely pretty broad, but focused on that idea of helping you be your best self, because self-care looks different for everybody. It's not one size fits all, and there's not one right routine out there. And, when you think about that idea of promoting your own well-being, I think that really helps to separate authentic self-care from maybe what we could call, like, I don't know, pop culture self-care, or I don't know what term to use there, but this kind of idea of like, treat yourself, like you were saying, go get a manicure or a pedicure. Like those are good things and they're fun to do, but they're not really addressing that sort of deeper need of like, how am I doing actually? Like what is going on in my life? Often a manicure or pedicure isn't going to fix that on a long-term scale, right? And so authentic self-care is really looking at, where do I need that extra boost, or where do I feel deficient, or where am I feeling like I'm not able to be my best self, and what kind of practice is going to help boost that, or what practice is going to help address it. I think a really, really simple example that I use a lot is with sleep. I think we've all had those moments, or we've all had those nights where we haven't gotten enough sleep. And then the next day we either feel like a zombie, or we have trouble concentrating, or maybe we get a little snippy with the people in our lives. And that's just like kind of a really quick but direct hitting example of, when we're not taking care of ourselves, like we're not getting enough sleep, then we see the impact on our lives in many different areas. And then if you reverse that, right, and you make sure that you're getting enough sleep and you have a really healthy sleep routine, then you make sure that you are at your best self, at least in that area, right? That a lack of sleep isn't holding you back from being fully attentive, or being kind of your best, in your best mood, or, not snippy towards other people, and not falling asleep at your desk or in the car. And that's just an example, right? Because I know that, in different stages of our lives, we are not able to get enough sleep, right? So sleep isn't the only way to practice self-care. It's just an example. But I like to use it just as that kind of, to illustrate the importance of, it actually can be something really challenging to do, right? It's not just going on a shopping spree, or like you said, going away for some kind of spa vacation. Getting enough sleep sometimes is really hard. And, when you want to watch that next episode of your show, or you're reading a really good book and you don't want to put it down, or whatever, it can be really hard to just, practice that discipline of closing the book, or shutting off the TV and going into bed and getting that quality sleep. But you do see the payoff of it too. So yeah, I think that is how I define self-care, is just, promoting any practice that promotes your overall well-being, and then breaking it into those 5 areas. And, sleep is just one example of what that could look like.
Sure. Well, and you touched on it a little bit, like what self-care is not. And I think an interesting way to define it is like what the world tells us self-care is like treating ourselves and just like giving ourselves gifts. But authentic self-care treats ourselves well and allows us to be a gift to the world. Like it gives us the foundation that we need to be able to present our best self in our world and in our daily activities.
Oh yeah, I think you put it really, really well. Because I think that, in order for self-care to not be selfish, you have to be coming from the right mindset. And I think that mindset I think there are 2 aspects of that. The first one is that we have to recognize our own worth, and that we deserve to take care of ourselves, to take care of our physical well-being and our mental well-being and our emotional well-being. And we can't just put it on the back burner. That's the first part of that. And then I think the second part of that is exactly what you were saying, that we each have like a mission or a purpose in life. And in order to live that out and to do good and bring good into the world, we have to be our best selves, right? And so practicing self-care helps you to do that, because when you have enough sleep, or you're addressing stress in your life, or you're taking care of any anxiety or depression that you're experiencing, or you're making sure that you're setting healthy boundaries in relationships, or cultivating, healthy communication in your relationships, or you're investing in your spiritual life, then you are able to live out that purpose more fully than if you were not addressing those things and just kind of going on autopilot or in survival mode, right? It's hard to feel like you're living a purposeful life when you're just trying to like get to the next day. And I mean, we all have seasons of life like that where things are busy, and sometimes we're like, we just need to be in survival mode, but you don't want that to be your everyday. You don't want that to become the norm. That is more of you hope for that to be a short-lived season, and then you move on and get back to your purpose.
Exactly. Okay. So let's jump into more of like our topic. So how would you say that like NFP and fertility awareness fit into self-care? How would you say that they are a form of self-care? How would you talk about that?
I think it all comes from that mind-body connection that I mentioned earlier. I think that when you are charting and whatever method that you're using, that whole process is bringing you in tune with your body and with what's going on in your body. And so not only are you able to notice any changes, but you're also able, I think, to just kind of track how you are doing. And so I think it has kind of a twofold benefit. I think you're practicing that self-awareness, like giving yourself that moment to kind of tune in and say, what's going on with my body today? How am I feeling? How is that all relating? And then I think the second part of that benefit is noticing, making connections, whether that's noticing, hey, I think something's off, or it's, oh, I think I've noticed that, at this point in my cycle, I tend to feel this way. And so if this tends to be a pattern, I can kind of use this information to my advantage, going forward. For example, if you know that kind of in the week or two leading up to your period, if you're feeling more tired or drained or irritable, for example, maybe that's the time where you kind of focus on just like self-care basics, like getting enough sleep, giving yourself time to kind of rest and recharge, sit back and read a book if you can, go for, a slow walk or something like that. And just don't put big projects, on your calendar during that time, or don't take on, don't maybe like plan a big party or something like that. Or, don't be putting pressure on yourself to start some really intense workout.
Definitely. Well, and I love what you said about awareness, and awareness is really how you can connect like fertility awareness and NFP to self-care. Because if you're just practicing NFP solely to plan your family and you're solely avoiding a pregnancy, then you're not really going to be able to link it all that well to self-care, because like I myself did this for about a year and a half before I really started like learning about my moods and energy levels throughout my cycle. And so when we say like using NFP as a form of self-care, it's following your cycle and being aware of the changes that are happening, and then knowing what you need to give yourself or allow yourself to do throughout your cycle. And just that your cycle is a really good indicator of the things that you need throughout the month or so.
Yeah, no, you put that really well. My work here's done. You're good, right? You said it better than I could.
Well, and I think something else that we should touch on a little bit is like medical issues that arise. So when you're charting and and you see something that seems off, or your instructor sees something and you seek medical attention, that is self-care as well. Giving yourself proper medical attention is incredibly important. That's, mind and body.
Yeah, no, that I think that is a great point. And I think that's often where I see that intersection of, mental health and physical health in my work with my clients, because like you were saying, when you notice that something is off, I think charting your cycle is an invitation then to work with your practitioner or work with your doctor to look at what is the root cause of that, right? Versus I think for a lot of women, when they're going, just because of the medical model, when they're going to their provider and they're mentioning some of, if a more serious issue comes up or something's off, we know that kind of the go-to is hormonal birth control. And I think that's just masking the cause, right? And so charting is an invitation then to really figure out what is going on. And I think that's absolutely a form of self-care, just in the same way that, when I'm working with a client, my go-to first is figuring out what is the best way to treat what my client has. So if my client has anxiety, we're not just referring them straight out to a psychiatrist. We're looking and seeing where is the root of this anxiety? Where is it coming from? If we need to have them go take some tests or get some kind of assessment, because anxiety can come from many different sources. Same thing with depression or trauma, all of those things, right? That it's not just, oh my gosh, we have to eliminate these symptoms, and once the symptoms are gone, then you're cured. It is much more than that, right? It's looking at what is what's their origin story, right? Where did these symptoms come from? How can we address that and get to the root of it? And I think in a very similar way, that's what charting is as well, is an invitation then to notice something's off because you're in tune with your body and you're noticing those signs. And then you have this opportunity to bring that to your provider and say, hey, we got to figure this out, right? Like, let's dig deeper
Something's wrong here.
yeah. Instead of kind of the Band-Aid or the, if we can just eliminate symptoms, and that's a sign of health, right? So I think that's a similarity in the world of mental health and physical health, is kind of wanting to move away from that. If your symptoms are gone, then you must be healthy. That's not always the case, right? Someone can think they're feeling fine, or someone can present as feeling fine, and in reality, there's something else totally going on that, maybe they're not aware of quite yet, or they're hiding because they're not trying to deal with, right? So, but yes, so I think that that's kind of where those two things link up, and how both of those can really be, like you said, self-awareness and an invitation to really, I think, truly address something that's going on, more effectively address something that's going on, rather than just eliminating symptoms or masking them.
Right, definitely. And I think another way that being aware of your fertility cycle can oh, I'm so sorry, can lead to self-care is while we never say oh, you should just anticipate that you're gonna ovulate in 3 days and base your family planning off of that. You can, in a sense, anticipate, okay, I'm coming up on, probably ovulation week. I'm going to have more energy. This is a great time to plan that big project, or this is a great time to plan to have a whole family party at my house on a weekend. Or if you're okay, I'm pretty sure that, ovulation is going to end in the next couple of days, and I have, these crazy deadlines for work. Maybe I should talk to my boss, see if I can extend that out a little bit. Maybe I should work really hard in the next couple of days and try to get on top of that, because I might be feeling a little bit less energetic in the next couple of weeks. So that awareness allows you to kind of anticipate and care for yourself in advance. Be good to your future self.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. That is something I'm trying to get better at. I'm always, when I want to put something off, I ask myself, what will future Julie appreciate? Yeah. And usually it's doing the thing right now. And then when the time comes, I look back, I always say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I pushed, I pushed through and did that. But I think, the self-awareness is so important. And I think that as women, and I think our society encourages us or pressures us to put our own needs aside or put ourselves last, or even just kind of not practice self-awareness and just go on autopilot and get through the day, or get through life, or get through this, stressful season of life, or whatever it may be. And I think it's really challenging to practice self-awareness, because I think sometimes it can feel very foreign, like, what do you mean I have to sit here and figure out what I'm feeling, or figure out my energy levels, or ask myself how I'm doing today? That feels weird. That feels uncomfortable, because you're not used to it, or you're told that it's selfish, or you've been told that, we need to put ourselves last and put other people ahead of us. But I think if you can kind of work through that initial sort of discomfort, or maybe weirdness or foreignness of asking yourself how you're doing, I think you'll find that there's a wealth of information there. And that if you can work with what's going on in your body, or work with what's going on in your mind, then you'll find that I think it's a lot easier to not get through your day, because that also sounds sort of survivalist, but I think a better way to say it is like thriving throughout your day, or thriving in life, right? If you can say, oh my gosh, I've noticed I don't have as much energy, and that's okay. So knowing that I don't have a lot of energy, here's how I'm going to tackle my day. Or I'm not going to, I'm going to be okay with putting off that project, or I'm going to be okay with not, cleaning the house from top to bottom, or I don't know, writing the next great American novel, or whatever it is. Or having those days where, okay, I feel pretty good today, so what else can I add onto my plate, like you said, so that I'm making my future self, making their life a little bit easier, because I have the energy now to take care of that. But I think that initial stance of self-awareness, or asking yourself how you feel, is a crucial first step, and one I think that many of us need more practice in. I include myself in that. I think it's this continual practice of, how am I doing right now? How am I feeling? What's bothering me? What's helping me? What's holding me back? When am I my best self? When am I not my best self? And I think charting just fits seamlessly in with that self-awareness, because it's that, every day, right? You're charting all of your data. And so it's just that moment of like, hey, I'm practicing self-awareness. It's specifically related to my physical health, but if I can also take a look at, well, what's my mood today? What's my energy level today? Then you're incorporating kind of that mind, body, spirit aspect, and slowly beginning to practice self-awareness. So I think it's a great kind of entryway into growing in self-awareness.
Right, because you already have it built into your schedule to chart at least one, if not multiple times throughout the day, depending on, the type of method that you're using.
Right.
And so why not just add an extra spot on your chart to chart how you're feeling? Either looking back on your day, like overall, was I, pretty up? Was I pretty down? Or, if you're charting multiple times throughout the day, like how are you feeling at that moment right then? What a fantastic amount of knowledge to have about yourself.
Yeah. And it's not, I'm sure, as you talk about with others who know a lot more than me, but it's happened. You're charting every day. And it doesn't take a long time most of the time. Right. And so it's this really easy, like, well, I'm doing it anyway, so why don't I just take that extra, it could be like 15 seconds. It could be longer. It could be 5 minutes, but just kind of thinking, how am I feeling right now?
Right. Exactly. I'm totally going to add that in to my daily charting. Okay. So we've talked a lot about self-care, but one thing I really want to define the difference between is self-care versus self-indulgence.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about the differences between those two?
Yeah. That I think is probably one of the biggest, one of the most frequently asked questions about self-care. And I think also one of the barriers to starting self-care. So a very important distinction. But yes, so something usually I tend to recommend asking yourself, why am I doing this particular practice? And I think that helps you discern, is this something that is authentic self-care, or is this something that's more self-indulgent? And the reason why I recommend asking that question, because I think it helps you get to that motivation. And if your motivation is doing something that is best for you, that will in turn be best for the people in your life and your purpose in life, then it probably is a form of authentic self-care. If it's something that you are doing because you just want to like escape from the day or escape from the world, or you can't deal with something, and so you're turning to whatever it is, then it's more self-indulgent, where you're not, addressing the root of what's going on. You're more masking or just kind of detaching, dissociating from what's going on. And I think a really good example is social media. And I include myself in this example. I am not immune to this by any means, but that just like scrolling, I love Instagram, but sometimes I have to remind myself that, in between clients, scrolling through Instagram is not a true break. That's not a true form of self-care. That's just like totally checking out so I don't have to use any brain power, but it's not restorative in any way. So then I'm just sort of in this like weird twilight zone of scrolling through my phone, and then I have to snap myself out of it and like move on to the next task. So I have to often remind myself it's not a real break when you're scrolling through Instagram and just totally zoning out. And so then I've been trying to be better about, going for a walk, or honestly, like doing stretches after sitting in my chair, for an hour, and doing some deep breathing and all that good stuff. But I think it's maybe a small example, but that's just I think an example of, self-indulgence is just kind of either doing something on the whim of the moment, or doing something to kind of mask or eliminate how you're feeling in kind of like a quick fix way, versus something that is authentic self-care. Doesn't have to take a lot of time, and it doesn't require special equipment, and it doesn't, like, anybody can practice self-care, no equipment needed, no membership to anything needed.
Right. You can sit and mindfully breathe for a minute,
Exactly.
right? And just kind of feel how you're feeling in your body. You can stand up and stretch. You can like go up and down the stairs in your house or your office.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that is the really neat thing. I mean, with NFP, it's helpful to have a practitioner, right? And to have your instructor who has gone through all of their training. But I think the value of NFP is that it's accessible technically to every woman, right? That she doesn't need to have access to hormonal birth control. It gives her back the kind of power, what's the word? It's totally escaping me. Oh no, I'm not going to remember it. But anyway, just maybe agency, maybe that was what I was looking for, but just kind of gives that back to her. I think the same thing with authentic self-care is that it's not elitist. It's not, you don't need to have be in a certain income bracket or live in a certain neighborhood, that anybody can practice self-care. And authentic self-care, right? Like maybe what we see or we read about in, blogs and things like that does feel elitist and does feel like, oh, well, yes, if I was making, this amount of money, then I could go on my spa vacation and then I could really practice self-care. But the type of self-care we're talking about, just like NFP, you really don't need like super fancy equipment for that. Right. You don't need anything special. And your example of mindful breathing, or just going up and down the stairs, or going outside and just kind of taking a brisk walk to wake up your brain. Those are all forms of self-care. And I would argue are way more effective than some of the other things that we're reading about in, a blog article, or hearing about, when people throw around self-care. And, skincare is a really big one. And skincare is self-care, which it can totally be, but that requires you to be purchasing the latest skincare, right, serum or moisturizer or, treatment. And so that I think, self-care goes way deeper than just skincare, as we can see.
Right. Exactly. Well, and what you mentioned about like really thinking about the activity, and does this, promote the betterment of myself so that I can be a gift to the people around me, if you're asking yourself that question and the answer is no, then it's not self-care. It's something else. It might be self-indulgent. It might just be like a time waster. I don't know. You have to ask yourself that question.
Yeah. And it can be, I think, a hard question to ask yourself because it forces you to be honest and really say, am I doing this because I know it's going to make me a better person? Or am I doing this because I'm stressed and I don't want to think about whatever it is that's stressing me? And so I'm just scrolling through my phone as a way to just procrastinate, right? And pretend that it doesn't exist for this time.
Exactly.
So, but even when you're doing something for yourself, which, is really like the definition of self-care, but anytime you're doing something for yourself that is truly going to make you a better person, then it will for sure benefit the other people in your life. And it might be hard to do. I think sometimes it's hard to, if you have kids, right, to maybe go out on a date night with your husband. Like, it's hard to leave your kids behind, right? You're worrying about them. Are they going to be okay? Is the babysitter going to know what to do? Are they going to like miss me and all those things? But in the end, it's better for your relationship
Right.
to spend time with your husband. And then you're going to come back feeling refreshed, even though you miss your kids, even though it was hard to be away from your kids. And they're going to see mom and dad have a life outside of us. They invest in their relationship. Mm-hmm. Mom takes time to spend with dad. Like, they're getting all of that information. And so you can see how taking care of yourself or, investing in your relationship, which is a form of self-care, then in turn benefits your family, going forward. Or if you're a single woman and, for example, say that you're charting, maybe you're able to spot a medical issue way sooner and you're able to work with someone and address that, for yourself so that you feel better. Because if you're not feeling like you're debilitated because of your cramps, or your whatever's, going on, then you're able to be more present in your life and with your family and with your friends and, with your significant other, if you're dating someone. I think all of those things, there's this like spillover effect. And so I think back to that question of, how do you know if self-care, it's true self-care or it's self-indulgence? I think that authentic self-care will always benefit you and the people in your life, even if it's a practice that's totally focused on you, right?
Right.
When you take care of your mental health, when you take care of, you're addressing the effects of stress in your life, or if you've had trauma in your life and you're going and you're getting treatment for that, then you are getting closer and closer to that authentic person that you're meant to be. And then when you're more authentic to the people in your life, you have better relationships with them. You have healthier relationships with them. You're better able to make a difference, whatever your purpose is, or just doing good in the world or bringing love into the world. And so I think that's what makes authentic self-care so important and so different than what you might be used to reading about self-care out there in sort of just, the popular culture, I guess. I know that phrase makes me sound like I'm 80 years old. But that's the only one I can think of right now. So that's what we're going with.
No, I totally hear you. And I think recently, a way that I've kind of been assessing my activities throughout the day is like, when I am finished with that activity, do I feel energized, empowered, peaceful? Do I feel positive emotions after I finish that activity? Or do I feel empty and, or more stressed or, or do I feel some sort of a negative emotion? And so, that could be another way to look at, your self-care practices is, did scrolling through Instagram really make me feel energized and empowered and peaceful? Or did it kind of leave me feeling empty? And did that walk around the block make me feel energized and empowered and peaceful? Probably. Unless you met a rabid dog on your walk. I think your walk is going to feel better than your scrolling.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. And you can't plan for that. So you don't even know, right? But no, I love that. I think that's absolutely a great question to be asking yourself, because it fosters that self-awareness that we were talking about before. And it gives you really, I think, an opportunity to figure out what best fits your needs in who you are? Because I think the answer could probably change depending on what's going on in your life and how you're feeling. Like even with your example of Instagram, I think that sometimes it can be a source of like creative inspiration and a way to connect with people and get ideas. And it can be really exciting. And then other times it can be more of a energy drain or a time suck, or it drags us into the comparison trap, right? Of, oh, this person has this and I don't, or they seem ahead of me and am I behind? And oh no. So I think getting in that habit, like you were just saying, of continually asking yourself, how do I feel now that I've done this? And does this feel like it was an investment in myself and in my family or my friends or my life? Or do I feel like it kind of pulled me away from that path that I want to be on? And then just taking that as information, right? Not
Definitely.
this opportunity to like judge yourself or be critical or, berate yourself, but really to say, okay, now I have that, data, and I can incorporate that into how I respond next time or move forward next time.
Right. And that's again where like the fertility awareness comes in, is having that data to know. And so maybe you think that a great form of self-care is going to be that walk around the block, but depending on the time of your cycle, it just turns out to actually be a complete energy suck. And it like, now you can be aware that, okay, that actually just doesn't work for me. It works for other people. That's great. Self-care is personalized to you, just like NFP is completely personalized to you and your fertility signs. Self-care is completely personalized to you. What works for me probably won't work for you.
Exactly. Absolutely. I mean, yes, absolutely. And I think that it's okay for that difference to be there, right? I think we need to practice removing any kind of criticism or judgment over what we think, quote unquote, we should be doing or should be practicing, and just saying, okay, in like a very non-judgmental way, what is best for me right now? And I'm going to just focus on doing what's best for me, because I know if I'm a better version of myself, and I'm, a better version of myself to whoever is in my life and whatever purpose I have there. And it doesn't do us any good to say, oh, well, so-and-so can go for an 8-mile run and I'm just exhausted thinking about even going for a walk around the block. It's like, it doesn't matter what someone else is doing. It just matters what is best for you. And I think we tend to get stuck in that, like, well, what's the best self-care routine, or what should I be doing, or what is a perfect self-care routine look like? Throw that out the window. It is not helpful. Don't go down that path, right? Just like focus on what's best for you, because I think, I talk about this a lot. I think we're very critical towards ourselves, and we're very hard on ourselves, and we hold ourselves to this honestly impossible standard. But then we look at other people in our lives, and we are so generous, and we're so compassionate, and we're so understanding towards them, right? Like if you had a friend who said like, oh my gosh, I am just totally drained. I have zero energy. And I told myself I would go, out for a run because I know it's good for me and I want to exercise or whatever, but I just don't have it in me. I highly doubt any of us here would say, oh my gosh, you need to go out and run. You're so lazy. I can't even believe you weren't thinking about going running. Like, you're going to ruin your exercise, habits. And it's just, you're a lazy, terrible person, right? We would never say that.
No, never.
We wouldn't even think it too, right? Like we would never think that about a friend, and we would absolutely respond with compassion, and we would say, oh my gosh, no, take a break. It's okay. You can go running, whenever you feel better, and like go make yourself a cup of coffee or tea, or just curl up with a book or take a nap, whatever you need to do. Like you take care of yourself. But then we turn around to ourselves, right? And what do we say when we don't have the energy to go for a run? We say, oh my gosh, you are so lazy, right? Like you can't even go for a run. Like it's not that hard. You should be able to do that. You need to just power through and push through it and, keep going. And that's the only way to, I don't know, be a perfect person or whatever. So I think we have to stop using that language towards ourselves. And I think we have to move more towards this compassionate, we're not robots. We're not impervious to the stresses of the day or what's going on, or even what's happening within our body, right? That we have to work with what our body's giving us in that moment and take care of it, because we are mind and body. And so I think, linking that back to not only authentic self-care, but charting, it's that, okay, I'm just observing what's happening and then responding in a way that I think is best for me, and removing any of this like judgment, like my body should be doing this, or my moods should be this, or my energy levels should be this, and just taking a step back and saying, okay, what am I working with today? And then how do I want to respond to it? And that, and just letting that be, right? Not putting any value on that or any judgment on it, and just letting it be. And I think it's a lot more peaceful. You used that word earlier. I think it's a great deal more peaceful to just respond in that way, and just kind of go ride the wave, go with the flow, and, work with what you've got.
Oh my gosh. I feel like we could keep talking for so long. Like, I just want to ask you more questions and like keep up with this conversation, but we are I think we've like already gone over a half hour, although most episodes are more than a half hour. So sorry guys. So
I'm sure no one's complaining. I'm sure you've got some really fascinating people out here. So everyone's like, more.
Honestly, Julia, I might like tap you to come back on another episode, and we could talk about like mental health and NFP and how that's connected. And oh my gosh, we could just keep going.
I'd be happy to come back. It's not even really a joke. I was going to say I joke about it, but I could talk about this all day and just keep going. So I'd be happy to come back anytime. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Julia.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Thanks so much for listening. I know that we definitely jumped into quite a few more things along the lines of self-care beyond fertility awareness and tracking that self-care with your cycle, but I just loved everything that we talked about, so I didn't want to cut anything out. If you are not already following us on Instagram, find us at Charting Toward Intimacy. I'd love to connect with you. I also would like to ask you if you love this podcast, if it's been a gift to you, please consider supporting me on Patreon, patreon.com/charting. There's lots of cool stuff just for my patrons on there. So check it out. Links to all of that is in the show notes. Until next time.